Hey guys, it's Bales. I'm at DraftKings and going to do a lineup review and then a model preview for today's games. I'm going to be taking a look at a lineup that I had last night that was fortunate enough to win the perfect game for I think 25K and did well in some others as well. So I've been on a pretty good run the past couple weeks and always difficult in baseball to not get too up when you're doing well, because while I think and hope I made a good lineup, there's just so much short-term variance that you can never place too much emphasis in a single day. And the same thing when things are going poorly. It's just you need to realize that you can be doing all the right things and stuff just doesn't work out. And there was a stretch in the very beginning of the year that happened to me, just was getting crushed. And outside of getting more data, which pretty much everyone has, I don't think I've changed anything too substantially, minor tweaks maybe, to how I'm creating lineups this year. So, you just go through stretches and luckily, this has been a good one for me. Didn't even play too much last night, but just played 3 lineups. Not very much volume. It was a small slate, obviously. So this was a 500 man perfect game. This was the 300. You can see my lineup here stacked. I went with almost entirely Cards and Brewers. It was really the Cardinals, I think, were the team that I was highest on, and then the Brewers were close. And I'll can take a look back here, and this is models from yesterday. Really one of the reasons that I had the Brewers here was because I thought it was a good potential leverage play against Carlos Martinez. So that's one thing that I like to do and have been doing more is even if I'm using a pitcher, if it's a guy who could potentially, if I think it's like just a high variance game where there's a wide range of outcomes, he could blow up, he could do really well. There's times where I'll use a guy and also use the opposing stack, not against each other, of course. It's also not common. I'm not typically trying to do that. I'm not doing it to hedge, just if I do it if I think that it's right. But anytime a guy is maybe underpriced or one of those sort of second tier pitchers who can get blown up, so Martinez isn't Syndergaard, for example, in this slate. So that's a great leverage spot, because if you think that there's going to be even decent ownership, it will drive down the ownership of the opposing offense, obviously. So if they do well, you rise in the tournaments, and at the same time, the 20 or 30 or whatever percent of lineups with the opposing pitcher drop. So you get this double bonus, and I think that that's a really nice way to be contrarian and have high leverage lineups, which is what you're looking for, obviously, in tournaments. You can see Martinez had a decent bargain rating for a high-priced pitcher. Usually high-priced pitchers are better values on FanDuel because of the way that their pricing structure works. So the fact that he was pretty up there at 9K on DraftKings at least suggests if you wanted to play him, you probably should have played him on DK. But it also means that perhaps he was a bit underpriced, and his ownership would be inflated because of that. But his price, of course, has nothing to do with his projection in a game. So, yeah, that was mostly my thinking with the stack. Strasburg and Duffy, we can look at the pitchers here. You can see Strasburg and Duffy weren't at the top. It was really tough yesterday to play Syndergaard because you either had to go really, really cheap with your batters, or you had to use a cheap pitcher, and there were no cheap pitchers who I liked. It was really just these top 6 that I thought were in consideration, and I wasn't on Paxton too much. So Duffy was a guy like, of these, he's the cheapest, and of these, he is the second highest strikeout projection. I had him right behind Syndergaard, 8.7, 8.5. He didn't have that. I believe he had 6 last night, 5 Ks. Strasburg had 10. We had him at 7.1. So the opponent total at 4.1 made me think that his ownership would be a lot lower, I guess because of the price and maybe some strikeout potential or something. At least in this contest, he was much higher than I thought at 22%. But that was the thinking there with that. And in the fastball, this was the 33 9,000 man. I think I might have been winning this at the end and got passed by. You can see these Ricky D lineups. He got 5 of the top 6 spots. He went with a Seattle stack, and really the difference was Wade Miley. So typically I won't draw too many conclusions just from looking at one lineup, but he had an obviously contrarian pitcher, so something that I'll look at and consider if how much ownership matters for pitchers. Are there spots where, of course, all else equal, I want the lower owned pitcher, but historically I've been probably less contrarian there than with batters, and maybe that's something to take a look at. So for today, going to look at pitchers. This is for Friday the 21st. Speaking of ownership, so we have a 15 game slate today and a bunch of usable pitchers, I think. And so in this case, there's probably not going to be ownership that's extremely high, like 60% on any of the guys, just because there's so many games. And the same thing with stacks. And in that case, there's just less reason to be contrarian or less reason to factor ownership into your model. Maybe you adjust your model because of that. Just because there's the ownership will necessarily be distributed more evenly, and so it's more of a value game and more about predicting what's going to happen on the field. And so just looking at these pitchers tonight, one thing that you can do that I don't think is super valuable for batters because there's too many correlations, but for pitchers they're pretty much just isolated, and it's almost like selecting golfers or something where you're trying to just find the best value. There might be certain things that you care about. So maybe you trust your model a lot and say, okay, I only want to look at pitchers in the top 30% of my model. So we limit it down to this, and I only want high strikeout guys. So I only want guys with a K per 9 above 8. The other guys don't have enough upside. And then already we've cut down the list to 7 pitchers, and then you can look at other things like maybe bargain rating if you're playing on both sites. Kluber obviously high, probably, or low, higher rating on FanDuel. Probably want to get your exposure to Kluber on FanDuel if you're playing him, if you're going to be playing him tonight, and might be looking at the opponent run lines. You can see one jumps out here with Alex Wood, who also has the highest K prediction of this group, and that will change potentially as lineups come in. Almost certainly it will change unless we've projected the lineup perfectly, because we look at the K rates for every player in the lineup and where they're hitting, and the handedness and Alex Wood's handedness and strikeout rates by handedness. So that updates in real time as we get new information, which is pretty cool. And then as a tiebreaker, you might look at something like batted ball or pitch data. So over the past 15, who's allowing, for example, the farthest distance? Kluber's actually potentially getting hit pretty hard. Average distance of 224 feet. This is just 2 games, but for a pitcher, 2 games is certainly more telling than for a batter. I don't think that that's meaningless at all. And an exit velocity of 93 miles per hour. So he's getting hit probably the hardest. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to throw well tonight, but it's a data point. And you have DeGrom a little bit better, and the lowest exit velocity tonight. And you can look at other factors, their pitch velocity, the change in pitch velocity, which can be telling. DeGrom throwing 1.1 miles per hour faster than normal over the past couple games. And that's a little bit situation dependent, but just matching up sort of, and the same thing with batters, that advanced data with how they're actually performing in terms of fantasy points. That can help you figure out who's actually playing well, and also help find discrepancies between ownership and actual performance, and try to get on those guys who are maybe hitting the ball really hard or throwing the ball really well and just getting unlucky, which is pretty much what you're trying to do in tournaments. So hope this was helpful, and good luck tonight.